All right, let's do this pre episode plug.
Mm-hmm.
The intro to the episode. Cool. So, thank you for tuning in to episode 14 of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast. On today's episode, we'll be breaking down continuous improvement as a part of our larger series on the foundational pillars for effective leadership. Specifically, we're going to touch on three things: championing continuous improvement, how to do it, and why it's important; why it's necessary to make sure you're solving problems through continuous improvement; and then lastly, how do you enable breakthrough thinking to drive growth. So please stay tuned, get your mining pans ready, because there are about to be a whole heap of golden nuggets in these hills.
Boom. Love it. Music. Dope intro.
Right?
Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity. All right, now, Legacy Leaders. This is your co-host, Jimmie Gonzalez Jr. of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast. This is episode 14, along with my homie, my dog, my boy,
Yes, sir.
Anthony Devon Watts Jr., a.k.a. Leadership Docent,
What's up?
a.k.a.
How's it going?
Trey Deuce in the house.
Yes, sir. All day.
So, it is a new day. We already kind of broke down some of the things that we're going to be going over in this particular episode as we ride along through this series. You said it so well. I was saying like leadership expectations, and I don't know, you said like leadership, I don't know, principles, and you're just so eloquent in how you break things down.
I just be talking. The words fall in line.
For our legacy leaders, again, we thank you guys for joining us. This is episode number 14. We are going to be breaking down continuous improvement in regards to, or I should say, as a part of our series in these foundational principles for leadership expectations. As always, I just want to remind you guys, number one, make sure that you are liking, you are downloading, and that you are subscribing to the channel. If you're listening to the podcast on any major platform, if you haven't heard, we're also on Amazon Music, so we're very, very happy about that.
Yes, sir.
Make sure that you leave a review. That would also be very, very appreciated as well. Number two, make sure that you take a snapshot, a screenshot, whether you're listening to the podcast on your phone. Yes, I'm an Android user, so I click the two buttons on the side to take a screenshot. Or if you're watching, again, the YouTube channel on your PC or on your phone, take that screenshot, go over to your Instagram account. Or we've had some legacy leaders going to Facebook, so wherever you want to go, I don't care. But what we are asking is that you take a screenshot, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, post it to your story, post it to your feed, and then tag us. Tag us at Legacy Leadership. Tag myself at Coach_Jimmie G Jr. Tag Anthony Devon at Leadership Docent. So we definitely appreciate that. Again, really what we're trying to do is have you guys involved. Let us know that you're listening. Let us know that you appreciate the golden nuggets that we're dropping and all the hotness that is coming at you with the Legacy and Leadership Podcast. And number three, share. Sharing is caring. Share with your friends. Share with your family. Make sure that you're sharing with other budding legacy leaders and even some old school seasoned vets in this leadership game. Again, we would appreciate that, and I'm sure they would appreciate that as well. So three things. Don't forget, we appreciate y'all. Know that we love you guys so much for, again, continuing to ride with us. So, my friend, as we embark on this journey in episode number 14, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Like I was sharing with you, I got to get out of the office a little bit earlier today. Finish up the things that I need to finish up. So that's always cool when I get home. Kind of enjoy, kind of dinner time and downtime with, the family, the boys, and get to watch them stuff their face while they both veg out. Geo on his iPad, and then Lennox was like watching Blue's Clues, which has changed a lot since I've last seen it. So I was kind of stuck too. I was like, "What? Hold on, what happened to the plot line? Where's Steve? Who's this guy?" Like, but I got to watch that, and then the missus, she ended up heading outside to go roller skating, and I put Lennox to bed and Gio's chilling, and then I messed around and like caught like the old man nap, like the dad nap. You know what I mean? Like I was just sitting there, I'm watching the news, and then like next thing you know, it's like Gabby walks in and she's like, "Hey, don't you have to record?" It's like 10 minutes to the podcast, so I've been like asleep for like an hour. I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. What now? What's going on? Who touched the TV?" So I'm just slowly embracing, the metamorphosis that comes with, just being a father and being an old man, and I had a spontaneous nap. So the good news is that, like, I don't need much sleep to operate. So, like, I was sharing with you, like, oh, I guess I'm going to be up the rest of the night because I got that hour nap in. But, yeah, man, everything's good. What about you with you, bro?
Yeah, I'm good. I can't do it. I was thinking about you the other day. I don't know how that young cat just be up like that. I need my sleep. So, but no, I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling good. Today was a good day. Some good conversations that I've had so far today. Things are, again, heading in a very positive direction overall in a lot of different aspects. So happy about that. Happy with the feedback that we've been getting on the last episode. So if you haven't listened to it, I say the last episode, really a couple of episodes ago, with Dalen Perez. It was just a really good conversation, and been getting a lot of good feedback from that. I feel really good about the last episode that we recorded, and excited about this one that we're dropping for the folks right now. So told you that the in-laws are here. My mother-in-law has been and my brother-in-law have been here since last Friday, celebrating her 75th birthday, so that was pretty
Beautiful.
cool. Yeah. So it's been good. All love,
So y'all eating good, huh?
We went to our favorite spot on Saturday. Went to Santiago's Bodega. Shout out to the Bodega here in Orlando, Florida, and also the place of employment for my son. So if you're here in Orlando, you go. Shout out to Christian, my boy, be working, doing this thing. I had a wonderful time, and actually yesterday was my stepdad's birthday as well, so went over to the mom's house and wish him happy birthday. Mom cooked some food, had birthday cake, and just lots of love over the last few days, so that's always good. Everybody seems to be happy and feeling good about where they're at and where we're at as a family. So again, all love, all good. Saw my nephews yesterday. I haven't seen them in a couple of weeks. So it was good to see the little boys running around and get to pick up Josiah, which I call it JoJo. And like I said, just spending time with the family, man. So quality time.
Word, man. Yeah. Word.
And then always excited about catching up with you and seeing how you've been doing and recording this podcast. So we're going to get into this continued conversation. Last week we spoke about employee engagement, and we have been telling you, legacy leaders, our folks out there, that the next topic that we're going to be breaking down is continuous improvement, and really like relentless. I love that word, relentless, but relentlessly seeking ways to get better. How do we get better? And how do we do so through innovation and being innovative, being creative, some of that breakthrough thinking, which we've mentioned slightly in other episodes, but using these different thoughts and methodologies, again, to have continuous improvement in the team, in an organization. And I believe what we wanted to start out with, since we're talking about continuous improvement behaviors, is championing continuous improvement itself.
No, absolutely. So I think that's the best place to start, just because, right, going back to our last episode when we were talking a little bit about organizational behavior, and we talked about the needs to like produce results, right? You have to be able to produce results in order, and the results you produce end up validating or endorsing the culture that you've created, right? in the pursuit of producing results, we have to improve. We have to get better. We can't rest on our laurels. I know, for those that have been listening and following along, I shared the story that I heard from one of the leaders where they were celebrating fourth,
Fourth place. Yes.
The fourth place cupcakes, right? Right. And so one of the things that's evident, from that story is that they had lost their desire to champion continuous improvement. Like when you're satisfied with the status quo, when you're satisfied with where you come in at, and even if that's below the expectations, and you're not constantly challenging yourself to improve, to how do we get to third, how do we get to second, hell, if we're number one, how do we stay one? We were one before. We were number one before. How do we allow ourselves to backslide into four? Was it something that we failed to do, or did just the marketplace innovate and get better, and now we're having to play catch up, right? If you're not doing that and having those conversations, then clearly you're not championing continuous improvement. And I think from a leadership perspective, that's so critically important, more so, from an operations perspective, because typically operations is the closest to the gaps, right? They're being exposed to them on a consistent basis. And I didn't really develop a huge, deep appreciation for the process improvement and project management work until I moved into the operations manager role at our organization very early on in my career, right? So I had been fortunate enough to get experience in operations as a sales leader, moved into learning and development and got that experience, right? And so the next step for me, I ended up moving into a process or operations manager role, which was responsible for kind of the support functions of operations. So we had workforce and stuff like that. We had a group of dedicated, like kind of floor support escalations that I was responsible for. But then I also had to wear the hat of process improvement and continuous improvement within the organization, outside of like PCI audits, but just like, okay, we have a new initiative coming out. Like, how do we implement this? And it wasn't until I really got into that role that I realized two things. One, that next to learning and development, continuous improvement truly is the lifeblood of the organization, right? You have to make sure that you're teaching people, investing in your people first and foremost, and then you have to make sure that you're refining and reviewing your processes, right? Those two things have to go hand in hand. If they're not working properly, it doesn't matter how talented the people are. It doesn't matter how talented operations is, right? The talent operations can be so, stellar that it can overcome some of the challenges from a lack of investment and also process gaps, but it's not going to be able to close the gap entirely, right? And in reality, a solid learning team, a solid learning commitment, and a solid process improvement commitment can actually shore up any gaps when you have talent opportunities and from an operational perspective, right? Because if you're investing in people and the process is good, you don't necessarily need the best of the best talent in order to be successful. The system, going back to more sports.
I would say, don't do it.
The system is built for success, where you don't necessarily have to be, the best at your position in order for the organization to have success, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think it's really important, starting with our operational leaders, like, don't put the onus on process improvement and continuous improvement to live in your support groups. Because as much as I learned about the importance and the process and I was responsible for it, I could only get things done through operations, right? I could only get things done through operations, and I relied on operations to bring to our attention where the gaps existed, right? But also be a part of the solution. And so I really do think it starts there. You have to champion those things, first and foremost.
Yeah, I appreciate you just saying, that last part, because that's kind of what I was thinking too. I mean, even in a support role from a learning and development perspective or learning and performance, I mean, there's only going to be so much we can do if we're not seeking feedback and information and the perspective of the operators. Because ultimately they are the ones in the trenches running the business on a day-to-day basis. And I think back for me, I kind of cut my teeth working with Matt Penny's, and getting into that role and working through that continuous improvement process. And we're always looking to get better. At least you should be, right? I mean, anytime that you get to that point where you're feeling comfortable about your performance, you're kind of resting on your laurels. Short term, maybe that will work, but in the long term, it's just not going to be beneficial for the company and the revenue and the positive things that you're trying to do as a team and as a company overall. So you should always be taking a look at what ways can we look to improve, and even if it's little by little, but get more efficient along the way. So from a learning perspective, if we have new initiatives, new trainings, again, new processes, being able to find out where the gaps are, what can we do to fill those gaps, coming up with solutions, partnering with operations, partnering with all of the different support functions, putting these ideas and these new strategies into place, and then still taking a look at, okay, is it working? How are we doing with that? Going back and possibly tweaking the strategy and continuing to enhance it along the way so that you completely eliminate those gaps, and again, you have those improvements in those areas that you were looking to see progress in. And then if need be, again, then you find maybe a different section, a different area within the business to continue to look to improve. But I do appreciate you saying, the engines of growth, do kind of sit with the organizational development, kind of those process improvement folks, customer experience, individuals, and just learning and development. It's important to continue to invest in those groups so that there's the right type of investment in your people.
No, 1,000%, man, 1,000%. I would also say too, excuse me. I would also say too, just kind of what you're touching on, the importance of, operations, being committed to continuous improvement. The biggest thing that I've noticed in my experience, the difference between other, organizations I've had the opportunity to work with and where I'm currently at right now is, prior to joining the current organization I'm at, it wasn't a part of our culture, right? And we're going back to culture. It wasn't a part of our culture to really index ourselves to what best in class was in our space. Like when we think about driving improvement, like I'm going back to our time together here at Sears, I don't really recall conversations where when we were talking about improving or getting better, where we discussed, okay, well, what is this company doing? What is this company doing? How does this company handle their call monitoring or their sales, their inside sales strategy? How does this company do this? We didn't really have those conversations. It was really centered around, how do we think that we can improve on what we're currently doing, right? Where I'm currently at, there's that's very much a part of our continuous improvement process as we are rolling out different initiatives or proposing different changes. There's this intentional, there's that word again, but there's this intentional desire to learn and to make sure that you're indexing yourself to what is best in class and comparing yourself. So like we're making a change as simple right now as our quality monitoring form, our side-by-side form, right? Something that everybody, if you've worked in any space, you need to assess the overall customer experience, or are your people doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? You think it's pretty straightforward, right? There's certain things that have to exist, and you want to make sure you monitor, you capture, and you score, and you rank, and all that stuff. It seems pretty straightforward. But as we're going through this process, one of the very first things we did was we sourced from our existing talent. We sourced what is their institutional knowledge from other best in class companies that they worked at to say, okay, well, let's put this on a matrix, right? And what did your quality monitoring form include, right? What were you assessing? And then when we were working or developing out our solution, we were anchoring ourselves or indexing ourselves to, the Disneys and the Wayfairs and, the Amazons, these major players, right, in our space, to say, okay, well, Wayfairs includes this, but but it doesn't include this. But our form does include this, right? And Disney, they measure these competencies, but they don't measure this. But we measure that. And the commitment at the end of the day was to ensure that from a foundational perspective, we had everything our competitors, best in class in the industry was measuring,
Mm-hmm.
well, obviously applicable to our organization, and the additional things that we felt were the secret sauce, or are the secret sauce that differentiates us, right? So I just think when you're talking about continuous improvement, and it's not just functional or tactical of like going through Six Sigma and Lean and all that stuff. Like I have my Six Sigma certification and all that good stuff, right? So I got the certificates out the wazoo, right? And it's less about that, to be honest with you. When you're talking about a commitment to continuous improvement, it's more about a culture or a commitment to constantly assessing your performance in comparison to others in the space, even if you're the preeminent player,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, even if you're the preeminent player, right? Even if you're number one, like constantly saying, okay, well, how are results comparing to this organization? Because they're dealing with the same challenges in the same environment. What does their sales strategy encompass, and how does that compare to our sales strategy? Where does it differ? Where does it align? What is their learning development strategy? What does that encompass? How does that compare to ours? Where do we differ? Where do we align? And if you're constantly doing that, you won't find yourself in a situation where you walk into a break room and there's cupcakes celebrating fourth place. You know what I mean? Because you're always anchoring or indexing yourself to the best in class. Even if you're number one, like, I don't care in any industry that you're in, whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's academia, all that stuff, you can, figure out whoever number one is there, right? In basketball and football and sport, in business and education, right? We'll use education to lay off the sports analogies just a little bit, right? But you got to be there. You have to be naive to think that an institution like Harvard or Princeton or Stanford, right, are not aware of what other Ivy League schools are doing in that space, right, or the innovation that is occurring in these different universities, right? If MIT or John Hopkins or right, any of these schools are doing something that's different, innovative, cutting edge, like Harvard is not just focused on what curriculum are we delivering. They're paying attention to what's happening in the education space, and they're making sure that they're staying at the forefront, because first and foremost, that's the value prop.
Mm-hmm.
That's the value prop. That's how you attract the best and brightest future talent. That's why people say I want to enroll. That's why people say I want to go and teach there, right? And so it's no different in your organization. If your organization is not anchoring itself to the industry standards, the best and brightest in the industry, you may be number one right now, but innovation is going to catch up to you, and after a while, people are going to be seeking out where the innovation exists, where the desire to improve exists, because what you're offering is dated.
Exactly.
And it's like, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of something cutting edge. I don't want to be a part of something that was in its heyday. Like, yeah, that's cool. Y'all had y'all little run or whatever, right? But if you've lost that passion, that hunger that allowed you to take that number one spot, right, and maintain it and continue to stay on the forefront of innovation, you'll very quickly find yourself surrounded by a bunch of people that have no desire to improve, because the people that want to get better and always curious and seeking to innovate and learn, they've gone where the innovation exists. So I think continuous improvement has to be about that. It's not just about these tactical things. Learn about lean, learn about Kaizen, learn about Six Sigma. I absolutely do it. And if you have a passion for process improvement or project management, there's definitely going to be a space for you, out there in the industry. But again, more important than those tactical things, if you are just operationally focused on challenging yourself to get better and always indexing your performance to others in the industry, regardless of ranking, whether you're number one or you are dead last, that is how you really champion continuous improvement in your organization.
Yeah, I think it's easy for a company or organization who is somewhat falling behind, right? Like, you have to do those things, but again, it should be a part of the culture of the business. But one thing I learned is it can be really easy to get it, but then how do you keep it? right? So as you mentioned, once we get to that number one spot, how do we stay there? And you have to stay there, or you stay there by the things that you just mentioned, right? And being open to suggestions from your teammates, from the folks on your team, um, the brain trust of the people that you've hired and that you've brought onto the team itself, being open to suggestions from other companies, like you said, and being willing to experiment and try different things, having that creative mindset, and like you said, being forward thinking and pushing the boundaries is what's going to help you to continue to stay in that number one spot, or at the very least be super competitive within that number one, number two, or number three spot. And then just to cap it off again is just the creating that environment of learning and development. And it's not just something that the company says is important, but it's something that is truly important to them. And you see that because of the decisions that they make, because of the conversations that they make. Again, I told you just, in some research recently, just kind of, floored. And I'm sure that this is not the only company, but it's one that I've came across recently that learning and development was one of their core values. And as you talk to people, within the company, you see that, again, that is something that they truly do live by on a daily basis. And one thing that I came across is, you can't build a foundation for the future without investing in your people today. So having that continuous improvement, having that continuous, and we talked about that in the last episode too, right? That employee development, but specifically focusing on learning and development, or learning and performance. All of those things are going to continue to help you get to those goals in that number one spot that you may be trying to achieve. And then how do you stay there? And how do you keep that spot? And again, keep making sure that you're still very marketable as a business, and that you're a player in that space for a long time to come, and there's just longevity, within that as well. So when I think about a term that I also recently kind of learned about was just, a generational company, right? And a generational company is thinking about the future, and how do I develop my people today? How do I raise up leaders today, so that we're not just winning today, but we're also going to be winning 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And all of that has to do with, again, being a champion of continuous improvement.
No, I like that. I like the being a generational company. That's the first time I really heard that articulated that way. But I couldn't help but naturally think, right, like, just to really drill home the point about investing, today for the future. I think you'd be very hard pressed to find any parent or any adult that would be willing to mortgage the future of their children, right? The future of their children, to stay relevant. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's certain things that, as a parent, or as a steward of the youth of future generations, that, like, we're just like, you can't compromise on, right? Like, I will never, for example, a super kind of, dramatic example of that, right? But, like, I'm not going to put, credit in Linux's name, at 2 years old, right now, and run it up like crazy, right? Because my credit is not where it needs to be, right? Like, that just wouldn't be smart, right? Why would I mortgage the future of my child, right? To satisfy my need for Netflix today, you know what I mean, or something like that, right? Like, it's and so it's easy to think about in our personal lives where there are certain things where we wouldn't mortgage our futures, we wouldn't mortgage our nest eggs or anything like that, right? We'd figure out how do we preserve what we're building while still solving the opportunity today. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that thought process translates 100% into the workspace, because you find examples time and time again of organizations that will mortgage their future in the hopes of achieving something today, right? And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as some of the things that we're talking about, but it can be subtle. And honestly, it's those subtle compromises, those subtle, decisions to, okay, well, we're just going to cut this. It's just temporary. and then we're going to cut this, right? That end up being, the death by 1,000 cuts that find you, 12 months from now, 16 months from now, 18 months from now, 24 months from now, right? Behind the 8 ball from an innovation perspective, right? Because that, one of the, in finances, in business and leadership and anything, right? The most valuable commodity you have is time. You like it's finite. I cannot get it back if it's gone, right? And so that time where you were not making those investments, where you mortgaged the future of your organization, where you did not spend time taking care of the engine of innovation, right? One of the engines, the pieces that contribute to the engine of innovation, you're only going to get so much mileage out of that bucket. You know what I mean? But before your engine kicks, and then like the car's total is not worth anything anymore, right? I've seen, you and I both can attest to that. We've seen plenty of, old clunkers on the road where the engine was taken care of and it's running just fine. It may not necessarily be the most aesthetically pleasing, right? It may not have the same type of sheen and shine that it used to have on it, right? But it has 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles on it, right? Like we can change the bodywork. The bodywork is nothing. But if that engine goes, right? And so I guess that would probably be the more appropriate analogy, right? If you're just thinking about, this vehicle that you're traveling in your organization, right? Would you pass up oil changes and, critical maintenance to ensure that, the exterior, looks flashy, right? That I need a new paint job instead of, getting, new spark plugs and an oil change, right? Changing out a fuel injector. Like, nah, you wouldn't make that decision because you understand the long-term ramifications that it could have on the viability of the vehicle, right? And so if you really look at learning development and continuous improvement as essential cogs in the engine of your organization, I think you would, you make some different decisions when you talk about investment. So I like that, trying to be a generational company or being a generational company also means that you're not mortgaging the future of your generations, right? And then you're being strategic, you're being effective at dealing with the circumstances as they are now while not compromising on the long-term strategy and investment that you've been building, because that this is temporary. Today is temporary. I'm building for tomorrow and beyond that, right?
Yeah.
No, well said. I like that.
Thinking about the future and planning for that while taking care of business today, and it is tough, when you're when a company itself is somewhat in survival mode and you can't necessarily see past the day, but it's up to the leadership, to focus on the things that are necessity today, but also how do we plan and prepare and develop for the future. So as you're going through this continuous improvement process, part of that is recognizing that there's problems, right? There's problems, there's challenges, there's issues, there's things that need to be fixed. So as you're coming across these different problems, it's definitely important to focus on kind of the critical few, like the few things that are really going to make that dramatic difference. And it's tough when you may find yourself in a situation where there's so many problems, so many things are broken, and maybe it's just because of that. The company wasn't forward thinking. There wasn't continuous improvement processes. So all of a sudden you wake up one day and processes, systems, techniques are outdated and old. And now you realize, well, in order for us to continue to move forward, we have to change, but we have to change everything. And again, when you're trying to survive, it is very difficult to not at least attempt to change everything. But it is important when you're thinking about, now that we know what these problems and challenges are, how do we go about solving them, is doing your best to focus on, again, the critical few. We mentioned kind of the Pareto principle and that 80-20 rule, right? So focusing on the 20% that are going to get us 80% of our results. Again, which is very difficult when there's so many different things going on, but that's where hopefully you have the proper resources in place to help you to prioritize, to kind of go through those process improvement, strategies to really say, okay, we know that we have 5 or 10 things literally, that need to be fixed. But what are the top 3 that are really going to get us to where we need to be short term, and then even in long term, as we start to continue to then focus on some of these other things that are on that list as well.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's where, going back to some of the tactical component, right? So I know I spent a good portion of the time kind of talking about the commitment, and the cultural commitment to seeking out continuous improvement. But here is where I will make a plug for some of the tactical benefits of traditional process improvement methodologies, is because it's very easy at times when you're looking at a mountain of problems to say, well, we got to fix it all.
Yeah.
Like, it just all has to get fixed, right? Because I understand too, as organizational leaders, as operational leaders, we're wired to be able to think, well, I can't endorse any of this being broken, right? So like, if I just say like, oh, well, we're only going to focus on this, that's kind of like me saying, well, we're going to focus on this 3, but the other 7 is acceptable, right? And that is counter to how we're wired. Like, no, absolutely, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
It all needs to get fixed right now, right?
None of it.
Yeah, none of it's acceptable. It's all bad, right? And so while I get that and I appreciate it, tactically, you can't eat the entire elephant, right, in one bite, right? You have to really prioritize what is going to have the greatest impact, and that's where I think using some of these tactical methodologies for process improvement is critical, because you have to be able to remove emotion from it and speculation. Like, if people are going into the discussion saying, okay, well, what should we work on? Well, I think, right? Well, I think this is going to be the best. Then we shouldn't be thinking at this point, right? And especially we find ourselves as an organization that's in survival mode. We have to be sure, right? So where are the facts? And so some of these more tactical methodologies that are requiring us to define the ROIs is critically important, because then you let the data drive the priority, right? If I'm looking at 10 things on the list and one thing is going to be dramatically transformational in terms of its ROI for the organization, lifting our revenue 10% versus something that's going to weed out, 0.5% of waste, right? 0.5% of waste. Well, it's very easy. It's very obvious what I should do, what I should focus on, what I should focus my efforts on. And so I think a big part of being able to solve problems, right, to your point, is being able to hone in on what is the most impactful problems to solve for. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get to it all.
Yeah.
Right. But you need to concentrate your efforts, right? You need to concentrate your efforts. You need to concentrate your resources, right, to drive the biggest impact, right, to drive the biggest impact. And so I think, kind of you sharing that is critically important. Like, the Pareto principle definitely works. But again, leveraging some of these traditional process improvement tools can really, really help you to define that ROI. And I would say, after that, right, really, as you're going through that process of defining what those problems are, being relentless about looking beyond the obvious, because I think that's a shortcoming too. Just for organizations, sometimes we think that the gap or the problem is, like I'm looking at it right now, right? Like, let's say sales are down, right? Revenue's down. Oh, okay. Well, the problem is that salespeople aren't trained. That's the issue, right? Like, I went on one ride and I listened to the sales pitch, right? Or I listened to a couple sales calls, and the problem is that the salespeople aren't trained. The salespeople are bad. That's it. That's the problem. That's obvious, and that may very well be true, but we owe it as an organization to do our diligence and to dig beyond the obvious and to ask the consistent whys to really get down to the root cause. Because the root cause may not be a training opportunity at all. The root cause may be a system opportunity, right? Where your sales folks are, they have to approach their conversation a certain type of way because of system constraints, because we have an archaic system or a dated methodology, right? That this is the only way for them to do the job. So they do the job that way and we get the results that we get. And no matter how well you invest in the latest sales techniques and strategies and lingo and objection resolution and super fancy, verbiage, right, to overcome, challenges or resistance. If the system is still the same, you're going to still get the same results.
Yeah.
Right. And now our resources, our efforts were invested in the wrong place, and it's not driving the type of impact that we want to see in the organization. So I think that's the other challenge, for a leadership team, for organizations, not just to, make sure that we're focused on, narrowing our scope of what we're trying to solve for, right, and honing in on the ones that are going to be the most impactful. But as we're doing our diligence to identify the problems and get to the root cause, that we're not just taking the obvious answer, because again, it could be something much more systemic that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is, which I definitely agree with, right, is making sure that you're doing the proper analysis and you're looking at the facts and looking at the data, and where is that leading you to the biggest, ROI and return on investment that you're going to get for these efforts that you're going to put forward. And then with that root cause analysis is asking those 5 whys, or asking the why question 5 times. So you ask it the first time, you get the response, well, why is that? Well, why is that? And you continue to go down. But even after you get to that 5th one, continuing to ask more questions and really dig deep into all of the possible areas that could be affecting maybe this one issue. And I always love when you use an example like that, because even it could be training, but sometimes depending on the operations team, that word just training is just kind of flippantly used a lot. And it's a training issue. Well, it's not necessarily a training issue. We have workarounds because there's bugs or there's things that are broken within the system. So we've created workarounds. Okay, yeah, I'll give it to you. We haven't trained, let's say, new hires on these workarounds, but we shouldn't have to have workarounds because we should fix what the problem is in the first place. Or when you say training, is it the content, and is it the content that needs to be updated? Are there changes that we can make from that perspective? Or is it the delivery of the content itself? And are there things that we can do within the trainers, the leadership team who's delivering the content to help them develop, right? And make sure that they have what they need to be as effective as possible. There's always just a litany of different situations that can come into play. So you have to keep an open mind. You really have to probe all of the different sources that are out there to get to the root cause, the absolute root cause of the problem, and continue to ask as many questions to feel confident about the analysis and then your decisions moving forward on what you feel are going to be the proper steps to solve the problems at hand.
Well, that's actually one of the things I like that you said too about the probing all the potential sources for solving the problem, because I think one of the other shortcomings that we run into in operations is we have this, I don't know, I want to say maybe hero mentality or maybe not. I don't know the best way to describe it, but we have this mindset, right, that, well, because we're living in it, we're the ones that are best positioned to know how to fix it. And that may very well be true, but then the counter to that was, if you've been living in it, then why haven't you fixed it already? That's one.
You might be part of the problem.
Right, that's one.
Potentially.
Right. But 2, right, what I've actually found is counter to that. It's when you bring in people that are completely ignorant or naive about how it's supposed to work, and you bring them in and expose them to it, and then just tell them to learn. Like, hey, can you just, observe and learn? And because people naturally are inquisitive, they want to understand. And so they will naturally ask questions through that process to get to a certain level of comprehension. And those questions will illuminate where some of the gaps exist. If it's not intuitive, right? If it's not intuitive, there may be an opportunity. As you're asking those questions, if I have to have this tribal knowledge passed on to me, right, from folks that have had it passed on to them and so on and so forth, then maybe there is a bigger systemic issue that we can fix here. And I, as the operator living in it, may not have necessarily identified that as the kind of the linchpin of a problem, because for me, I have the tribal knowledge. I grew up in it, so I know. So it's like, oh yeah, no, you just got to do this and you keep it moving, right? And to me, it's that simple because it's minimum effort, right, to do so, and I just keep it moving. But because it's not intuitive, right, we could be glossing over what is a bigger systemic issue, and that one thing that, in my mind, maybe just, is that, well, you just got to do the workaround. That workaround may be the delta in the 10%, the 10% improvement.
Yep.
Like it could be just that workaround. It could be because of that workaround existing, it's not intuitive. You can't just plug anybody in from the street. You require additional expense and investment in the training process to account for that workaround. There's additional work streams that are being driven by that workaround that causes additional costs in the organization, and so that could be money you're investing back into recognition programs or back into your drivers for your revenue. But you have to have all these support functions to exist to support the workaround, because it's just a workaround, right? And so I've always found that to be helpful, is to bring in somebody that is not married to the business, the process, doesn't have the institutional knowledge or the tribal knowledge, and drop them in, ask them to learn, ask questions. We're here to help you. Force me to explain it. Force me to explain my business to you. And as I find myself explaining the business to you and then having to explain to you something that is either not documented or that I picked up along the way, or I find myself trying to rationalize and justify why we do it that way, chances are those are all of the things that are the root cause problems that need to be addressed and solved for in order to really unlock the potential for the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said, man. All right, so we've chopped up, I think, very, very well. Being a champion for continuous improvement. And then within that, there's going to be problems. How do you solve those problems? How do you keep an open mind and do a thorough root cause analysis? The last kind of tenet that we wanted to discuss in regards to overall continuous improvement behaviors is cultivating and enabling that breakthrough thinking, right? And helping your team. And we talked about a little bit with just being innovative, right, and forward thinking. But in that process is how do you really help the team to put on a different set of lenses and have those paradigm shifts, especially if they've been there for a while and there is that institutional knowledge. How do you help to change that mindset so that they're seeing things differently, and maybe not completely, but like you just said, they're able to somewhat see like an outsider coming in because they've been able to, again, take off those old glasses and put on a new set of lenses.
Yeah, good question, man. Really good question. So I think there's a couple of things, right, that can help cultivate that. And some of the things I've picked up along the way. Kind of in my journey, especially this new organization. I mean, I think that's probably worth stating too, that, for our listeners, I really hope that you all understand that as we talk through these things and we're sharing advice and tips and stuff like that, these are not things that we knew by osmosis, right? These are things that we've learned along the way in our journey, from learning from other people, from asking questions, from picking people's brains, from observations, from seeing what it's like when it's done wrong, maybe being a part of when it's done wrong, right? And then learning from that and finding ways to improve, right? But one of the things that I think is really helpful to help break out of that thought process, right? Kind of get away from some of that the shortfalls or shortcomings of kind of that tribal institutional knowledge, is when you find time to like going through the investment process, or you're building out your project team, to try and get as many cross-functional stakeholders as possible, right? In at any opportunity you can get. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be around, okay, we need to fix this problem, so we need somebody from this group and this group and this group and this group, and so we'll bring them all together. And because they have different thought processes and they work in different organizations or different parts of the organization, we won't have that kind of legacy knowledge or tribal knowledge that will bog down our creative thinking. But because to be transparent, it's hard to really cultivate the needed level of creativity and collaboration when the only time we get to do it is when the place is on fire.
Yeah.
Right? Like, think about that. That's like That's like saying the only time that your squad. Now I am going to use a sports reference. That's like saying the only time that your starting team or your starting squad are the people that you're bringing in to win the championship for you, whether it's football or basketball. The only time they get any time on the, let's use basketball. The only time they get any time on the court together is in the fourth quarter of the title game. Like, bro, like when the odds are the stakes are the highest, that's when you throw me in. Like where now I have to figure out this person's nuances in their communication and make sure that we're on the same page. And every single gap or miss or anything that's dropped is magnified or amplified that much more because the stakes are through the roof. Like, can we get like a preseason? Can like we get a chance to like just get to know each other? You know what I mean? Like get a couple games in before like we actually try and make this title run. And so I think that's a shortcoming of organizations. A lot of times, the only time we build our dream team, and put them in the game, right, and get them the opportunity to get reps together, is when the stakes are the highest. Like I think back to, here's a good example: the '96 Dream Team, right? It was supposed to be the greatest collection of basketball talent ever. I know the '92 Dream Team is the one that we hold the standard to. Absolutely, so I'm not sleeping on that. But some of those players at that time, they were a little up there in age. Like Larry was up there in age, Magic was up there in age, right? So they're the ones that definitely established the kind of the reputation of USA basketball as really being like preeminent, right? Because we got away from using college players and we had these pros and they went and dominated and nobody even saw them. But that '96 team actually had the designation of being the greatest collection of basketball talent ever because everybody was in their prime. Everybody was in their prime. And if you recall, this is crazy. I love how things just kind of fall together like this. But if you recall, the undoing of that team was the fact that one, they are already bought into the idea that nobody on the world stage could challenge them. So they were the best collection of talent, but they had no chemistry. They didn't practice that well together. They didn't play that well together, right? And while they were resting on their laurels of being number one from the '92 season, right, and taken for granted, the rest of the world took those 4 years to really invest and innovate and figure out how to get better. And what happened? You had Argentina, you had France, you had Spain, you had all of these countries really double down and focus on how do they invest in their international programs. And the U.S. team ended up losing to the competitors because they found themselves quickly going from 1 to like 3 or 4 because everybody else was innovating while they were not indexing themselves to the rest of the industry, right? And so going back to kind of the gist of that is you can have a dream team of talent to try and solve this problem, but if they've never gotten reps together before and you're throwing them in when the stakes are the highest, it may not work out so well. And so how do you avoid that? How do you get them preseason? How do you get them practice? Well, you have to embed that into your culture. So like one of the things that we actually do is, throughout our training, like the leadership training that we're doing right now, we've built together, we built cohorts of leaders, entry-level leaders, that are from different business units as a part of the cohort. So you're not going through training with, everybody that's in voice or all of the people that are in writing team or all the people that are in specialty. My cohort group consists of somebody from voice, specialty, email. We don't work together normally, right? So we've created the space, the opportunity for these people from different business units, different backgrounds, different experiences to learn together, to work together, to deliver together over the course of 2.5 months, right? And if you approach all of your training that way, well, what happens when you have a bigger initiative and you need to pull together people from different backgrounds and experiences to collaborate? Well, I already have the experience of working cross-functionally with some of these folks. We have the chemistry. We put in the reps, right? So it's nothing for us to do a pickup game. It's nothing for us to, be thrown into the championship game and we have a little bit of a different rotation because I've already worked with these individuals. And so I think that's the other problem that organizations make is too often the moment we think about, oh, we need diverse perspectives and opinions, is when the stakes are the highest, and we can't afford to have a miss on this. And these folks don't have the chemistry, the rapport, any of that going for them, and then it exacerbates or magnifies when misses occur, and it raises the stakes unnecessarily. We can control that just by making cross-functional collaboration a true tenet of continuous improvement and are part of our culture.
Yeah, you have these teams and these organizations that have been working in silos for such a long time, and then like you said, now it's crunch time, or that the ship is sinking and we need to do something different. Oh, we probably should really work together, and like you said, cross-functionally get together, share ideas, and how do we work off of each other's ideas, and then within that process try to be more innovative in the solutions that we come up with. So, you're talking about making sure that as you're going through these different projects, having just a really diverse group of stakeholders and bringing everybody to the table. But you also mentioned too, like it's whether you're talking about practicing and getting together and building synergy within a team, it's investment, right? Like you say, you can't, it takes money to make money. But when you're thinking about investing and you're investing to get a return, regardless if we're talking about financial investments or just the investments of time, which is a resource, and calories, which is a resource, is making sure that, again, it's part of your culture and not something that you're doing because it's the last resort, or you realize, okay, well, now we have to do this in order to survive, in order to move forward. Again, that's what builds a foundation. That's what builds that future growth and allows for the improvement that you're looking to really sustain within those returns as you continue to invest in your people.
Because I was just thinking, like, not to belabor it just a little bit, but like, how can you can't expect rapport or chemistry to exist if we haven't had the opportunity to work together. Like, how often have we been thrown into situations where we're used to working with our group, and then now we're asked to expand beyond that, and we have very minimal interaction and prior to this, and so it just slows up our ability to accelerate time and really get to the root cause, and to to really get to working on the problem, because you have to go through that chemistry phase, right? That phase of getting to know one another, and how do we communicate effectively in the whole nine, right? That kind of really slows down your progress. Like, I'm thinking about you communicate differently, right? So you communicate differently, with your teammates at pickup games than people that you've been, working the season with, right? So, like, if I hit the playground and somebody's not cutting, somebody's not passing when they should pass, like, the way I approach that situation may be a little bit different. I may not say anything at all, right? I may try to overcompensate for their shortcomings and just work around them. Maybe I start cutting them out altogether, right? I'm like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna pass them the ball anymore. Like, they can't dribble, they can't shoot, right? Play defense. Maybe like, hey, play defense, right? But I'm not gonna have the healthy friction that's needed in order to build a team of high affinity. But with people that I've been building with and working with, right, like through the off season, and then through the games, and we built a rapport over time. Like, the way I communicate to you during the game and during halftime is a lot different, because we built a rapport. You know where I'm coming from. You know my intent. I know how to communicate to you effectively. I know how to motivate you. I know how to hold you accountable. All of those things, right? And so we're able to get more things done. And people call that, oh, they have better chemistry, right? Well, yeah, exactly. They have better chemistry because they've had time to develop all of these things that are critically essential in order to deliver the results that you're looking for. So why, as organizations, do we not look at it as really what's required to build a team and operate our organization like that, like a team, meaning that, offense gets reps with the defense, and, you guys are sometimes attending film sessions together, you work out together, all of those things. And why are we treating it like pickup games? Right? Or, all right, bro, you go and work on your own game, and then, when it's time to play, like, we'll just throw y'all in the game really quick, but it's for the championship. It's for the championship, right? And you got to figure all that out. You got to figure out communication and play styles and idiosyncrasies and timing and all of that. And you got to do it when the stakes are absolute the highest, because you're not going to get an opportunity to do this again. Like you're unknowingly setting yourself up for failure, because you're robbing yourself of the most valuable component of continuous improvement when it comes to communication, when it comes to chemistry, when it comes to rapport. That's the way you set yourself up for success, to have diverse ideas, to cultivate, create creativity, to champion continuous improvement, to actually solve problems, is by making that investment and doing those things.
Putting thought to it. I just think that there has to be a strong level of discernment to see those things and then to act on those things. But other thing I think is maybe even more critical. The example that you gave about the 1996 U.S. basketball team is just humility. Realizing that. I think about situations that we've been in, and it's almost, you think so highly of yourself and the work that your group has done, and you can lull yourself to sleep to thinking that there's not other good ideas from even folks within your own business itself. And it's just important to have humility, to have that good discernment about the type of judgments and the decisions you're going to make when you're looking at these different ideas, when you're listening to different folks. You got to be humble to make sure that I'm listening to, again, a diverse group of individuals. And as you're listening to the ideas, again, having good judgment and also being humble in those ideas and those suggestions, so that you're not just hearing something and then just shutting it down right away. Really analyzing it, really working through it, and hopefully even building off of it to make sure that we're collectively creating the best possible solutions based on, again, these different thoughts and perspectives from all of the stakeholders that are coming to the table. Humility, discernment, definitely important. And then again, all of these things that we're trying to do, right, is, how do we improve the return? How do we really get the type of growth that we're looking for? And again, taking off those set of lenses, putting on a different set of lenses, and really having that breakthrough thinking, and really being, what can be considered a breakthrough leader, because you're seeing things from that perspective and you're really working towards it in that respect.
Yep, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So, continuous improvement behaviors. We have just run down champion continuous improvement. How do you solve problems? Making sure that you're doing your analysis of that you're checking the facts, that you are doing a very healthy, very strong, a very deep root cause analysis. And then how do you cultivate and enable that breakthrough thinking and drive growth through bringing all the stakeholders to the table, being diverse, making sure that there's discernment and good judgment in the decisions that you're making. There's humility in that process, so that you're open to all the ideas and all of the diverse thinking that's around you, and realizing that you don't have it all figured out. And it's going to take bringing, multiple people and multiple verticals, maybe even within your own business, to the table, and sometimes even going outside of your business and taking a look at what the competitors are doing, so that hopefully you get to that number one spot. But even if you get to that number one spot, you're able to keep it and truly, hopefully, really create a company that can be considered a generational company and is here not just for today, but for the future and for the long haul.
Well said, man. Well said.
So I hope our legacy leaders, I like what you said at the beginning, I hope they were ready to mine and get all those nuggets that we just laid down for them. As we look to the next episode, again, we are going to be finishing up this series and really getting into integrity and taking a look at how we conduct ourselves, the decisions that we make, the character of the person, the standards that we hold ourselves to and that we hold our teams to, and how important that is to the person, to the team. And especially, again, if you're looking to be a leader worth following, your character and your standards and just the integrity that you have as a person is probably the biggest component, right? Because it's not just what you do in front of people, but it's what you do when people are not looking and you're all by yourself. And are you making the right decisions in the right way for the right reasons? So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be our next episode. Again, we thank you guys. A couple of things before we leave you today. Number one, make sure that you subscribe, that you download. Click the buttons below. They're all around. If you're following us on the YouTube channel, hit that little bell as well so that you are alerted every time we drop a video. And don't sleep. We are going to continue to drop some bonus episodes and some additional content for you. So you want to make sure that you hit that alert button. So you may think, oh, well, every week they're going to drop a new video. You never know. We're going to surprise you with that bonus content and some additional learning. So hit the button and make sure that you're alerted. Number two, click. Take that snapshot, take that screenshot, whether you're listening to the podcast on your phone, whether you're watching the YouTube channel, watching the video itself, take that snapshot, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, post it, tag us at legacyleadership.com. If you're on Facebook, Legacy in Leadership Podcast, at Coach_Jimmie G Jr., at Leadership Docent. Tag us. Let us know that you're listening. Let us know what specific nuggets you took from this, what resonated with you the most. We definitely would appreciate that. And then number three, share. Share with your friends, share with your family, share with other legacy leaders that are just starting out that you know would be able to really, really gain a lot from these stories, these experiences, these different tactics and tenets that we're breaking down for you folks. And also for the vets that are out there. Repetition is the mother of learning. So even if you've heard some of these concepts, it's never a bad idea to be reminded of some of these things, and maybe even just hear a different perspective that on a concept or an idea that you learned or were taught before, but you're hearing it from two different individuals coming at it from, again, a different angle with a different perspective. So do that. Sharing is caring. We appreciate that very much. Again, this is Jimmie Gonzalez, your co-host, along with Anthony Devon Watts Jr., co-host of the Legacy in Leadership podcast. We appreciate you guys very much. And until next time, God bless and stay encouraged.
Absolutely.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
You have just listened to the Legacy in Leadership podcast, hosted by Jimmie Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you live, lead, and leave a legacy worth remembering. Until next time.